Welcome to episode 508 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and he's Emile Evanesian, and I have been off camera for a little bit. Yeah, I haven't had any friends to talk to in a few weeks, but I'm glad that Emile is back to help me not only bask in the glory of two straight 5-0 wins for Barcelona with Celta to come tomorrow, but first on the agenda, I have to ask the pressing question, Emile. How's it going this season?
Pretty well, right? Yeah, it's off and running, and yeah, I mean, it's actually been enjoyable in a way that you hope for, but I didn't necessarily have. I mean, I thought Barca could win every match, that they've won thus far, but just the spark and the sparkle of the performances has been fantastic. It's like an endorphin rush that I haven't felt in a moment. Just watching Barca against kind of batter teams that they should batter.
Well, isn't that always the standard, right? That you can't
Yep.
win at Barcelona. You have to win a certain way. And Barcelona
Hmm.
right now are winning and winning in a certain way. And so Xavi might be rewarded that because I think the first thing we talk about, while it's not official yet, they haven't announced it yet. We know that Xavi renewal is coming down the pike. And we will talk about Alejandro Balde in a second. We know also the other renewals. But yeah, we talk about Xavi's renewal first because if you are the club, we'll see what happens after Celta de Vigo. But it seems like announcing it after 2-5-0 wins would be the only move, and it seems like they haven't officially announced it, but a win against Celta, 3 straight wins in that kind of fashion, especially if they win by any margin, is going to feel like it's the right time to do that. And it seems like the deal is going to be for technically 2 more years until 2026, but really the actual contract renewal to be signed is reportedly till 2025, with automatically being extended until 2026 if certain sporting objectives are met, which you would assume a sporting objective would be a trophy or two. And it's one of those things where, with the board also their time or their mandate ending in 2026, so that means they will have to be voted back in and all those things. So with the election coming up as well, it feels like for Xavi, not to say it's the same situation both ways, but signing for 2025 with an extension to 2026, it basically says that, hey, if I'm not fired in 2025 to 2026, if that makes any sense, where instead of having to fire him, they would just not renew him, which is actually, I think, for PR sake.
Whatever new regime is coming in. If there is a new regime at all.
And I think, like, politically, that's just an easier way to do it, right? To say, hey, Xavi, thanks for your time, but we don't really want you and need you anymore, or you're automatically renewed to 2026 because you've met the sporting thing. So it really does. It sounds like tie that contract that Xavi's going to have directly to winning. Which I think, again, if anything, like for all the Kool-Aids who say, Xavi out, get him out already, like, again, those people we kind of ignore. But for
That
everybody else,
that's insane to me. Yeah.
everybody else is saying, is the next phase of Barcelona, if they're going to reach the heights again to contend for whatever, and when they're financially healthy again, and when they're back in the Camp Nou, right? Because again, this still feels like, not to say it's a 3-step process, but this feels like step 2 still, right? Where it's like step 1 was Koeman and Kike Setien and rock bottom in the early times of Xavi. 2 is progress, is regaining a foothold, winning your Champions League group, yeah, advancing to the quarterfinals or something like that in the Champions League. And then 3 is obviously, I mean, not only, yes, they won the Liga, but I mean, really being the team that can win a treble, being back to the mountaintop, if you will. But I mean, it's so weird though, because we watch those Champions League games. Man City, to me, even watching Bayern Munich, like Man City seems to be the only team that is where Kool-Aid's want Barcelona to be back at. Like Real Madrid, they're just winning in the 93rd minute. Like I'm not.
Yeah, like they're doing Real Madrid's playing the hits which I'm sure they're enjoying. But so one question: there's no details publicly out there about the performance incentives in Xavi's deal, right?
No,
Are there any specifics
no,
out there?
I'm speculating, but again, my
Yeah.
speculation is based on if they say sporting objectives, that to me
Oh yeah.
trophies, and just I mean, with a manager, it's much simpler than that, as opposed to like you have to score this many goals. Like that's not ever a case with managers.
Oh
It's
exactly.
always about performance, or and the performance of the team. Not even like fans enjoyed it. It's more like, yeah, you got to.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, my assumption would be too that I imagine. Yeah, I would say the over under is kind of you have to hit at least one league title. I think you have to win at least one each of the league and the Copa del Rey, and at least back to back I don't know, maybe back-to-back quarterfinal appearances in the Champions League. At least be one of the sort of top 8 again, or somewhere in there. Kind of, but that all makes sense. I mean, I think anyway, whether they have these things or not, over the next 2 years, if Barca aren't kind of at that position, I'm not even without judgment, without agreement or disagreement. I mean, the seat would be pretty hot. I mean, even a couple of spirited second place finishes and moderate success, winning a Champions League group, like that's not enough at this point. That was okay when Koeman got the boot, but at this point, yeah, the goals are loftier, and all of this actually, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, right. It's not like he has to win the Champions League to keep his job. It's a matter of how far he gets there. Because as I talked about on the earlier show this week, and last week, that Champions League money, especially without the Camp Nou gate revenue right now, is essential to Barcelona in the next year. Like essential. So getting from the round of 32 to the quarterfinal. I mean, even that jump is just so important, and that is the difference between. And we'll talk about these two next now here, affording João Félix and Cancelo or not. Like, because not only has it been 3 matches with those two, like, I know it feels like entirely different. And it's, again, as the great Dale Grove of Total Soccer Show said, you got to keep two things in your head because things can be two things. And one, it's early days, right? I mean, you hedge our bets on Félix and Cancelo. But I will say, with the small sample size that we have against the opposition that we did, I mean, especially that first game, that game that Cancelo started against Real Betis, he was just such a difference maker. Like, I mean, it has been such a pleasure to watch this team the last two, not even because of the 5-0, but because they won 5-0 with a complete and utter domination of passage of play.
Yeah, with a performance that's worthy of a 5-0 win.
Exactly.
Like it's not, it wasn't sort of random penalties and the other team just making idiotic errors. It was we have dudes and they're doing the stuff that you would envision them doing. Like kind of
For
the
Antwerp, like I had said in the 5 headlines, that 5 was enough because the group who came on that substitutes in the last 30 minutes, they wanted to score 6 in the 7th. And if anything, it felt like disappointing that they didn't get one of those to go because there was a few opportunities, like Lamine Yamal, that tight angle shot and things like that. But Barcelona had already done their job, 5-0 for 73 minutes, whatever it was, until they got the fifth.
Well, against Betis too, it could have easily been 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I mean, it's actually sort of 5-0 performances that somehow at most just do justice to the performances, if not actually somehow undersell them in the scoreline.
Yeah, I mean, I think when looking at how the two Joãos would find their way to Barcelona, and I did make this comment too, that and to kind of bring all of this together for Vermereen, for Royal Antwerp, who Barca fans got to really truly see for the first time, and then the Joãos. Like I've already said that if the Joãos continue to play this well, and obviously not every game is going to be 5-0, but if João Félix, I think even more so than Cancelo. Like Cancelo, if he continues to play this well, which is very possible, like that to me seems more likely that this is João Cancelo. It's just
this seems like sustainably excellent,
right? Because he's the best right back, just pure talent, technical ability, understanding of positional play, perfect situation for Xavi. He's the best right back that Barcelona have had. I mean, without hyperbole, in a long, long time. Like now that he's put together 2 consistent performances, I can already cross off my list Serginho Dest, Nelson Semedo. Maybe, again, we're going back to, I want to give credit to Sergio Roberto in 2015 under Luis Enrique and say he was very good. So we're really talking like, I'm just hedging my bet. Maybe there were 3 or 4 Sergio Roberto matches that were good back to back to back to back to back. But João Cancelo was already like nearing that vaunted run of games at the right back position, and now we're talking about Dani Alves already in 2012, right? Like that's how quickly we're going back to that era of how good Cancelo has been right away. Now his situation with Man City. Now there was a rumor that they would be happy with 25 mil because he just does not want to be there, but he also had a deal until 2027. So that Man City does not have to deal with his amortization. It does mean that it's going to be a full amount, like close to the contract, which is to me more than 25 mil. So I'm interested in wondering about how that all shakes out. Felix is the one that's more difficult because not only do Atletico Madrid, obviously Barcelona would be the one team they're like, yeah, we do business with you, but only when we win those negotiations.
Right.
We're not giving you Felix, who was, I mean, the player that they spent a club transfer fee record 120 mil plus on. Like, he was their guy. He was supposed to be the big attacking talent, their generational superstar, the way they went out and bought. And while it has not worked, and Barcelona have, I mean, if anything, they can go to the negotiating table and say, hey, Coutinho, Griezmann, Dembele, like, we know how you feel. Like, we get it. We can empathize with spending big on who is supposed to be the players to find errors and not have it. But amortization is also the problem for them. They want around 80 million for him because
that's what I read as well.
5 mil. And that was the whole thing, that by extending his contract with Atletico Madrid, he made his wages possible for Barcelona to pay for and take on some of that cost, because Barcelona, if not for the extension of that contract, would not have been able to afford this season's wages. So doing that extension allowed him to go on loan, and another team was willing to take on those wages, or a portion of those wages, whatever it all worked out to be. But because there's 54 mil yet to be amortized on that contract, again, that means that you're talking 54 mil for them to hit zero, like net zero. And because he's still under contract as well, that's why they want to get something else. Because even if it's, I'm trying to do the math quickly, 26 mil would be their transfer. Basically, if they take 80 mil for Felix, they're only making 26 mil in a transfer, really in a fee to go into their pocket, because again, 54 mil was still owed an amortization. And that brings us to the big concern that you have Vitor Roque coming in January. And we'll talk about him in a second, but you have him coming in January for 30 mil plus potential. Again, some of those incentives already being paid up front of that 31 mil added on. I don't see how that contract...
He tops out around 60, right?
Right. Well, 30 plus 31.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yeah. 61. Yeah.
Are, and that whole amount will, if I'm understanding this right, that whole amount as a transfer fee will count against this next summer on those books. So you're talking about that contract that'll be on the books then in the summertime, plus then again trying to play for Félix and Cancelo. And again, like, maybe it's going to be, and even with Ansu coming back on his wages, and I watched him against Brighton. I know I'm throwing everything we're going to talk about for the show at the same time, but basically just doing all the math, it's like, it sounds like it's Félix or Ansu, but it also might be, I mean, with Vitor Roque, it might be a matter of you have to find some kind of trickery or magic or loan deal again for Félix for a second straight year.
Yes.
And maybe, again, Man City, best case scenario, would be accepting of 35 mil for Cancelo, but still Barcelona going to have to find a way. I mean, Champions League quarterfinal has to happen, or those coming back. Like, this is a pure incentive thing. If they do not get European TV money, there's no way to make all these numbers work. And even then, I want to warn people, there might not be a way to make all this money work because of Vitor Roque showing up. Like, it feels like already financially, it's an or, not and, an or. And then and Barcelona will not be able to get that defensive midfielder, which is, again, I wanted you to respond. And then that's almost the next thing we have to talk about.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the if there's been possible to have sort of a, I don't even know, like, just kind of a nagging feeling, or, just a little bit of, where you chuckle and shake your head, is these two kind of glorious performances where you just sort of sit back and enjoy, just putting 5 on teams that, can't do anything about it, is this the revelation that this might just be a kind of a one-time deal. There might not be a return engagement with both of these guys, and both of them have been, I mean, by no means the only contributors, but I mean, just really central figures. And I don't know, a couple of guys who've both themselves delivered, but also it seems like jarred loose a little bit of aggressive spark that the team was just desperately in need of, for a while. Like, in most matches, even the matches that they won, very rarely were they kind of this level of inspiring and this level of just kind of euphoric fun. So, I mean, I think my first hope is that, you work out some sort of creative deal with, ideally Atletico for João Félix, and then you figure out some sort of deal where you can cough up cash for Cancelo. Now, the Vitor Roque thing is really unfortunate because we don't know exactly how long he's out, right? But
today it was reported by pretty reasonable sources that he'll be out from around 8 weeks to 2 months, which is not necessarily. I mean, that doesn't really change anything. It doesn't change his timeline. It means that in theory,
No.
he's working his way back in November, December, and as we already knew with him, as I kind of warned, like whatever second half of this season was going to be for him, he was coming off a full Brazilian season where he's a regular starter and playing a lot. Like the
Yeah.
expectations for him from January to June had to be completely tempered because he's again an 18-year-old just coming off
Yeah.
playing a full Brazilian season in
Yep.
that kind of altitude and weather and getting like again this nasty tackle of the ankle, like things like
Yeah.
even if he returns to the injury before that season ends, like it's tempered expectations. If Barcelona can find a way to get him registered, again, it's not even affording him with money. It's not even handing
No.
over the 61 mil to
Yeah.
Atletico Paranaense. It's a matter of like getting his wages registered and having them agree to that transfer fee. That being La Liga agree to the transfer fee that they set out and agreed with the other club with.
Yeah. So I mean that's the problem is the Vitor Roque thing is, I mean it's a large bet. All of it comes home to roost very quickly, which is really unfortunate. I mean I'm kind of reckoning with the fact that and it's like a weird thing. I'm enjoying the Joãos so immensely, but there's a tiny part of me that's trying not to get too attached. But yeah, I mean the hope has got to be that you can work out some sort of creative deal and maybe even just, I don't know what you can do with Atletico to get João Félix back for at least one more year on loan and then kick that can down the road a little bit, and then you just have to hope. I mean the problem is though, as a legitimately top tier right back who's going to be what, maybe he's 28 now, so Cancelo would be 28, 29 when the season's over. I mean, you have to hope that you don't get trumped by someone else's arm. I mean, in both of their cases, I mean, it's if you can conjure up the 105 million, and assuming Atletico is willing to just take a $26 million gain on João Felix and whatever, be done with the whole thing, that would be ideal. But it's still, I don't even know what the roadmap looks like to getting there.
Yeah, I don't know. I've read Wuthering Heights and I've read Little Women. I've done my homework and
Mm.
I'm online enough to know that you're not supposed to catch feelings if somebody defines that they're friends, and that's what a loan is,
Yeah,
friendship, not a
yeah.
nothing more. So yeah,
I know this all feels like some sort of like like a summer fling, and just hopefully we can part terms on on the best of terms with whoever has to leave.
I did grow up in the years of Judd Apatow though, so it's just like
Yeah,
with all those movies. So it's a weird thing where it's just like,
yeah,
but all those rom coms from my my younger teenage years always taught me that the ugly ones are the ones that are those real bums are the ones that always get the
yeah.
girl in the end, and it always makes sense that Jason Segel and Mila Kunis it always works out, of course,
Oh, totally.
in a Judd Apatow world, of course. But anyway, so speaking of the João Felix stuff, I mean, even the set pieces has been different. Like that's how incredible it's been. Because Xavi noted here, Sergio Alegre has been the coach responsible for the set pieces. And yes, Ferran Torres scored a free kick, sure, but you could tell that there's a danger there with Felix,
Mhm.
and he also mentioned Gundogan being a huge part of that. With Pedri out, has been delivering those set pieces, and Barcelona are just looking more dangerous, whether they play it short or whether they play it directly into the box. Like Felix is another contender, like another menace in the box to add to Christensen and Kunde, even with Araujo out, adding to the center backs who are both dangerous in the air, as well as Lewandowski somewhere there, right? And there aren't usually there isn't that other guy crashing or that other guy, that fourth man, if you will, who's a danger. It's these two center backs plus Lewandowski, but now he's being that other danger. Because even going back to the days with Messi and stuff and Busquets, like Busquets was never like your defensive midfielder who's standing 6'2", whatever, 6'3", whatever Busquets is supposed to be a danger in the air, but he never was, and that was never really part of what Barcelona were trying to do. And it seems like yes, they are more dangerous on set pieces, which is a part of it. But more importantly, I think to talk about, there are two things that Barcelona is doing different as we talk about these results. Before we head into Celta, the two things that are most impressing me about the way that Barcelona are playing right now with Felix in that starting lineup is one, and Gundogan was amazing against Antwerp in this as well. Their tight space control, like the control of the ball and control of passages of play in tight spaces, allows you to, and then Fluminense and now the Brazilian national team and our friend of the pod, the Purist, has been working on this kind of stuff. But basically, these new numerical overloads where you kind of throw caution to the wind, throw everybody around the ball, Xavi isn't necessarily doing that. Pep Guardiola isn't necessarily doing that. Brighton isn't necessarily doing that. Like those are still teams that have major passages of play where you kind of know where the ball is going next based on the progressions, the patterns, and again where players zonally are supposed to be. So it's different like that. But what Barcelona kind of are getting back to, which we have not seen in a while, is kind of jamming everybody around together in the middle of the field, keeping your wingers wide, sure, and say, all right, you guys are more the release valves, and we're really going to kill his opponent by breaking them down to the middle of the field. And I mean, the best way to bypass numerically, the best way to bypass your opponent is to pass around them, like to play around them in numerical advantages through the middle of the field, because again, that's where the congestion lies. And then, yes, you get 1v1s on the wings, but if you're able to break through in the middle like Barcelona has and finding that free man, now the angle on goal is much, much different. And you're not just crossing and you're not hoping that you can make those 15, 20-yard pass perfectly. It's a 10-yard pass vertically that's opening up space. Yeah, and so I think finding that free man in the middle of the field and also by having again those tight space controls has been just terrific. And the other thing too, and you can speak to this, people have this argument about the three forwards or the four midfielders, but it's like it's the same system though, guys. Like nothing has changed. Like it's that Félix, because yes, he's more of an attacker and he's more of a goal scoring threat, of course, than the inverted winger in Gavi. And Gavi has been better moving him back to a midfield role. I mean, I talked about Gavi the last two shows quite a bit, so I'm not going to rehash that stuff. But just how Félix just changes all that. It's again, you're looking at the heat maps, it's the same positioning, with the exception of the fact that, as I mentioned for Balde he's able to defend a bit more, and you're putting less on Balde to always be the one to create width and go out wide. Like Félix is a danger to run in behind from the wing. He's a danger to run in behind through balls through the middle. He's a danger to come back to the ball and combine with Gabi or De Jong or Balde or whoever. He's a danger to receive from a center back from a long pass. He's a danger to do all of those different things. Like he's a really talented player in that way. And so he does more than what the inverted left winger was supposed to do, whether it's Gabi, whether it was Pedri, whether it was Gundogan. I mean, even when they would last season, when it was Dembele on the left and it was Rafinha on the right, or when you had Abde on the left, like it's just all of those guys do things, right? Like but Abde has elite speed and skills in dribbling, and Dembele is 2-footed and elite in that way. But Félix is a 2-footed, just versatile attacker midfielder, just a perfect fit to that role. And somebody did call me out that I wasn't like I didn't poo-poo the move to Félix, but I said what I said, and I stand by it. That it's a long season, and I'm not trying to poo-poo what he's done so far. But as I said, the risk of Félix, right? The risk of it was that it wouldn't have worked. Was that there wasn't a way for it to work. But I'm also not ready to like completely say, hey, I'm going to eat crow because it's been perfect. I gave the grade a B when he was transferred because the ceiling was an A+, but the floor was a D. And that's why I went with the B, and I stick by it that this could also go sideways, sure, but early goings and also the propaganda of him wanting to play for the club. Like, we're really overdoing that a bit. Like, his dream was always to play for Barcelona. I get it. I understand that, right? He failed at Atletico Madrid. Not failed, but he never really worked at Atletico Madrid.
It didn't work out.
Kind of a failure. And now he's where he wanted to be, where he's comfortable, where he's wanted, and he fits in a system. Finally, right? And he also, again, 120 mil is a player that people expect to be a superstar in the world. And he's looking like a superstar in 2.5 games.
Well, it's really funny because, I mean, there was a period, I don't recall exactly how at least the dates, but the timeline of João Félix at Atletico de Madrid. I mean, it wasn't a flop from the beginning. Like he had his moments and he had his times there, and
they won the Liga.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's he had obviously it was a terrible season for him last year, and like I feel like there's just the acceleration in, I don't know, I don't want to say judgment, but yeah, I guess like judgment or just settling the results and not wanting to revisit them. I mean, this guy is still only 23 years old, and he's a couple of years removed from being a literal innermost circle, prospect in Europe.
Top 10.
And
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, easily. Yeah. And so it's not like he didn't forget how to play. Like he was kind of a classic kind of change of scenery guy that, you get to a place where you feel comfortable and you're able to play your game, and lo and behold, you're still really, really good. And so I think a little bit of it is that. I think the I think we might have the world in general, we might have overstated the demise of João Felix, sort of both prematurely and in in magnitude, and also the possibilities that he could sort of regain his status.
I got an NBA
Um,
comparison for you. I hope you like this one. To
yeah.
me, this feels like Elton Brand. Now, this is for our old head. This feels like Elton Brand going from the Bulls to the Clippers.
Yes, it actually, like, I like that because
He was what, a top 2 pick? He was like,
I think he was either number one or number two overall.
yeah, the world was on his shoulders. The Bulls,
Yeah.
I think Tyson Chandler, like they were too young, or they were just playing a way that didn't support him. And then he goes to Clippers, and they're like, "Hey, you're not necessarily the guy, but yeah, you're our number one. You're our most
Yeah,
talented player, but also like, yeah, how far can you take?" I mean, I'm hoping that Barca with Felix goes farther than the Clippers ever did. But yeah, that was the best Clippers that we ever saw.
yeah. I mean, it really was. The one funny thing is like to take the Elton Brand comparison a little bit. Brand was sort of brought in. He was a number one. I think he was a number one overall pick with the Bulls, and he even played well for them. But he had the sort of the terrible look of being drafted. What was it? I think a year or two after Michael Jordan hit the shot to win the sixth ring in Utah. So it's you're never going to be Jordan, but then you're immediately kind of a number one overall pick coming into the Bulls, like technically who are only a couple of years removed from winning a championship. And it's funny because João Felix is kind of sliding into Barca in along that same timeline following Messi's departure from Barcelona. Now it's the cupboard the cupboard at Barca is not nearly as bare as it was with the Bulls. So he doesn't have to be the absolute kind of savior messiah figure, but yeah, I mean, I think he's a really good player who there was the move to Atletico wasn't a bad move. It wasn't ill conceived at the time when it happened. It didn't work out, and yeah, I mean he's found an atmosphere where it works. I mean, he hasn't been catastrophically injured. He hasn't been like a massive head case. It just schematically and everything, it didn't work. He didn't get along perfectly with Simeone. But yeah, like he's the perfect kind of buy low candidate. And if anything, I mean, I don't know how such a thing would have gone on, but if Barca had a lot of money to throw around, I mean, it's the kind of thing where you might have even try to swoop in for just a bargain basement. We'll buy this guy from you guys, player, and a little bit of a lottery ticket, assuming that his floor is at least of a certain level of competence and talent, and the ceiling is astronomical.
To me, it just seems really simple that like he's a player that plays better, even in rest defense, like to defend. He's a player that plays better in teams that have the ball. It's just like it feels simple. Like he's so good on the ball, his technical ability, his runs, his understanding of what to do when your team has the ball, that like, again, he's better in defending with the ball than he is without it. I mean, and some of those like mercurial superstar, again, like even like a Messi, not to compare the two, but it's like Messi is obviously better in a team with the ball. Like he's not a player that is going to be is going to be succeeding on a team who gives up 70% of possession. I mean, I think, and even like as Argentina, that was always the argument Argentina, that if they're like not having the ball against Brazil and defending and defending and defending, basically they're all defending for Messi and then trying to have him go out and play hero ball, right? And that's always like that never led to their success. It almost did because Messi is the greatest player of all time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But, I mean, this latest version of Argentina that won the World Cup was one that could both play with the ball and then also, yeah, defended like hell without it. For Messi and for in a unit and for the team, and they had enough talent around it. But
yeah, like the weight was distributed a little bit off of his shoulders. Like it wasn't immediately as soon as they got the ball, purely like, hey, come here and get it and go save us.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a few other quick here. Balde's renewal is till 2028. Release clause is $1 billion. And the reason why the Balde thing really excites me is because, as I've said this is no disrespect to people know how I feel about Pedri. I've been talking praise about Gabi for a week, and a lot of the other young talents I mentioned too. But always looking at world football and other teams and stuff, for Barcelona to potentially have an elite, especially a player that we'd expect to round out into being a top 5 left back in world football, like who has the potential. Like right now, as I've said before, he's a top 3, top 2 maybe the top one left back prospect in all of world football. For Barcelona to have that is exciting on paper, but for them to, in theory, have the best left back prospect in world football signed until 2028 under control, it's just like, you cannot, other teams cannot compete when you have that position, left back and right back, when you have those positions solidified at a high level, and like especially from your own academy. I mean, like, say what you will about Jordi Alba. I'm not saying he was better than Busquets and Messi and any of that stuff. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that having that guy in that position and then Danny Alves on the other side, I mean, that's a huge reason.
It does so much.
Even before fullbacks with Pep Guardiola and Kyle Walker, and we've seen the last 5, 6, 7 years, before fullbacks were considered so important as they are on the transfer market, in a way that now things are shifting with defensive midfield, right? And the pivots, like those prices, like now people are really valuing that position as well. But until fullbacks were really, really valued on the transfer market as well, like teams that had elite fullback were just above and beyond everybody else, you know? And I mean, to have him under contract for that long, and even at 1 billion release clause, like Barcelona did their work, and I'm overjoyed by the Balde thing, because again, like, it sounds crazy to say, but Pedri and Gavi are more easily replaced in world football than Alejandro Balde's are, and not the version of him now, but like the version that he can be. And again, a top 3 left back you don't replace, because teams don't get rid of that player.
So that's actually a really because there was always a thought that I had, and this goes back to, I mean, any number of, it always goes back to NBA conversations and stuff like that, but it was, it's easier. I remember even just when the Lakers thing was falling apart, and, back around, 20 years ago. And the question was, are you team Shaq or team Kobe? Like, who do you keep? I remember I was team Kobe, but
I said neither.
But the compelling argument was that you can get 75, 80%. You can find 75, 80% of Kobe more easily than you can find 75, 80% of Shaq. And so I agree in the sense of, so Pedri and Gavi, while they are just spectacular singular talents.
They're better than Balde. Like, I'm just like, I know.
They're objectively speaking, they are.
Here, be like, you said Balde was less or more irreplaceable than Pedri and Gavi. It's not what I said. It's positional.
No, but I actually agree with you in the sense that as great as they are, there are more versions of players that can do 70 to 80% of what they can do than players who potentially have 80% of Balde's upside. The upside might not be in a vacuum as high as what it is for Pedri or Gavi,
right?
But it's difficult to find. Like, it's hard to find the store brand Balde. You know what I mean? Like, just relative. You're not going to really replace any of them. But the drop off from Balde to kind of whatever another cost effective version would be is going to be much greater than from the other two.
That's the argument I'm making already in the team. If Pedri is out and Barcelona is still playing their best, because Gundogan can play a similar role and a similar job, and if Balde is hurt and Cancelo is going to stay on the right, then the drop off for Barcelona already is like Marcus Alonso, and like it's not comparable. Like, the drop off from Balde,
that's steep,
beyond repair.
So I do have one question for you before we move on. So you said top 3, 2, 1 left back prospect in the world, and I emphatically agree. I mean, I think he's I'll say top 2 at worst in case I'm forgetting somebody, but my knee jerk is to say number 1. Where would you actually put him among left backs in the world, irrespective of age and where they are on their trajectory?
That is a good question, and as you're talking, I'm like bringing up a list of
I'm trying to remember too.
That's why I like keep myself all nice and tidy here. I mean, I think off the top of my head, I think like Theo Hernandez is better than him from Milan. I think Alonso Davies still has earned the right to be better than him at Bayern Munich.
Okay.
I think there's already an argument, like watching PSG with Nuno Mendes. I think that's already an argument to be had.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that Robertson from Liverpool is better.
Mm-hmm.
That's 4. I mean, you want to say Luke Shaw? I mean, I mean, maybe that's 50-50. I think it's, again, 50-50. Like, he's older, but I don't. Gaia is better. Even in, I don't think
there's Zinchenko.
I don't think Balde is the best left back in Spain. I mean, maybe. I mean, Ben Chilwell for Chelsea again. I think that's a wash.
Yeah, I mean,
Estepinian from Brighton. Even watching him, I think that's a 50-50. I think they're about the same.
yep.
I mean, maybe for Arsenal, I would have said Kieran Tierney last year, but now with the Real Sociedad, I think that's also like 50-50 a wash.
Mm.
I mean, Zinchenko for Arsenal,
Yeah.
probably. So, like, I think he's top 10. Like, just having
Yeah, I sort of keep landing around like 7 or 8, and
maybe 4 to 8. Like, I'm going to say 4 to 8 more than I'm going to say 5 to 8.
yeah, because there's a bunch of washes there. So if all of those are coin tosses, I mean, if all of those go Balde's way in someone's mind, yeah, he could be top 4.
Yeah,
And
I think, and to that,
if you go the other way, he's maybe number 9 or 10 or something. But on all,
I think it's him and Nuno Mendes from
Mhm.
I think like that's it. I think that's 1 and 2 right now as to where they're at. So speaking of young prospects, though, Lamine Yamal, his renewal likely on the coming down the pike as well. That being Jorge Mendes being his agent. Same thing with Balde. Same thing with Ansu Fati. Expected to be announced at the beginning of October. Before Barcelona are on their way to Porto. So again, with Champions League stuff, it's always like a good moment to announce this kind of stuff and the fanfare of all that. And we don't know exactly the details to it, but remember, he signed his first professional contract at 16 for, I believe it was 2 years to take him to 18. And he would extend this contract for, I said it on the last show, so I'm not going to go back and look it up again, but just extend it till he's till he's 21 years old, which is 2030. I'm just like whatever the math is. Like, so
I guess. No. So what is he? He's 16 now.
Yeah.
So
take him. Sorry. So he's 20. So he's 20.
Should be like 28.
Well, so he's 23 so 23 in 2030. It sounds like that's like with incentive, like add an extra extension after 2028. But either way, it's going to be money. It's going to be like real money. Like right now, he's still technically being paid. He's getting paid inflated youth money, like of the top of the youth pyramid, like beyond getting paid as a low professional, but that's going to be an actual first team deal. Like, hey, this kid's already in the first team. Like, you're going to pay him like he's in the first team at Barcelona. And
this is sort of like, again, to go back to the basketball analogy, it's like when a late first rounder really blows up and, for the last couple of years of his rookie deal, he's still only worth like, $1.3 million on the salary cap. And then all of a sudden, like the contract extension kicks in. And
Austin Reeves of the Lakers actually would be the most. I know we keep talking about the Lakers, but that would be the example, I think, for that. Even though he was like a free agent and he was even more expensive.
My God, that contract extension that they got him for was absolutely glorious.
Right, but
I know. I just wanted to gloat about that for a moment.
That a team can just come in and pay a release clause, especially in Spain, and now he's gone. Or again, because Jorge Mendes is his agent, you think Mendes isn't constantly just fielding call after call after call for him, and I mean that's why Balde has a $1 billion release clause, and same thing with Ansu's $1 billion. Okay, so speaking of Ansu, we had 2 more things. The women that were out. I watched the full 105 minutes of that Brighton match yesterday. As a neutral, it would have been a fun match, but of course, like you know how I feel about football. Like teams that play football that is enjoyable and progressive is fun to me. So Brighton was obviously I was rooting for them against the Athens team, and obviously with Ansu up there, it's interesting because Zarbi has been playing. He's basically playing as a secondary striker. Like he likes his attackers to be able to play a bit more fluid. Like they're not attacking midfielders. They're not actual like center forwards. They're more in like play off each other, if you will. So it was João Pedro working with Ansu up top, and Ansu really was like the secondary striker behind João Pedro. Again, playing a full 105 minutes, which is pretty incredible. Like it was a plus 13 in that second half. And to me, it was tough because I think people jumped at the idea that Ansu didn't look totally comfortable there, and I 100% agree with that. He did not look comfortable. He did not look like the chemistry with his teammates was too good. It's pretty crazy to think, and I almost rethink his first 2 years. His first touch when coming back to the ball is like that of a center forward, which again is not a compliment. Like it feels like a center forward. Like it's good sometimes, but it's like it's not great. Like it's not as good as his teammates in João Félix and Mitomo on the left wing. Like his first touch was sloppier than theirs was, and we saw that for the last year and a half, even when he was healthy at Barcelona. Like his first touch, like maybe we have to accept that it's not like the pristine idea of a first touch that I think I always had for him. Like that maybe that wasn't ever there at all, and I'm like rethinking that history. Or it even still could be a confident and comfortability thing where as he gets more comfortable with his teammates and understands them better. And I think with the Ansu thing, as much as I watched it and I'm looking for certain things, I am not going to give a grade or really define the success of this loan until the end of the loan. Like until we see the final numbers, how many goals he scores over the course of the season, how many minutes he got. Like as I said, because they're in the Europa League, that being Brighton and the Premier League, Ansu will get minutes. Like he will get time in that rotation. Like whether he's a sub or starting, whatever. Like he's going to get some starts. He's going to be a sub in a lot of games. Like he's going to have to play a role for them because they only have so many options and they're playing in some big competitions. So Ansu will get his chances, and it's kind of kind of be patient at progress, and that's so hard as Ansu. I mean, more than any other player, I said it on Twitter yesterday. More than any other player, I try to manifest with Ansu success.
Yes.
Hey, if I believe it, if we believe in him enough, maybe he will start to turn the corner that we want.
I dream for him. I dream of success for him with all my heart. Yeah, I think manifesting is the best way. I mean, I will absolutely go down with the Ansu Fati ship. I mean, I wish it was taking less water right now, but I will be here till the bitter end with it. But it's a little bit tough. But I mean, I do think you're right to actually give him time. I mean, I think that's the only way. It's the only way that we can. And yeah, I mean, I still believe in the talent. More than anything, I think. Maybe I'll have to eat crow on this at some point, but I still think it's so much of a confidence issue with him, and like he had this brief fleeting moment where I think he mentally was trying to shift into the sense, into the idea of being a central foundational superstar, and the injuries robbed him of so much time, and then when he came back, not only was he not physically what he had been when he got injured. The sort of what might have felt like unwavering faith in him at the time of his injury had very much wavered, and he was not guaranteed of anything because the team itself had bigger fish to fry too. And I mean, I am hopeful that at a team like Brighton, where at least they are where they are, they're obviously trying to reach for the upper third of the Premier League, and they're going to try to make some noise in Europe and everything like that. But they are simultaneously both a very, at this point, a very, what I consider a very stable, rock solid first tier team that doesn't have insane outsized expectations also. So it's a little bit, you can kind of simultaneously feature but also be behind the scenes a little bit. And I feel like that is kind of the setting that if he can regain his confidence and he actually trusts that is, and that setting kind of is what it is. And I feel like that might be a little bit what he craves. Just the, not being in the fishbowl the same way, not having.
He played 105 minutes yesterday. Like when is he going to get the opportunity? Like when was the last time he played 105 minutes for Barcelona? Like,
I mean, I think he only played, he played 90 minutes last year, once, twice, maybe?
Yeah.
And so at the very least, it'll be nice. I'm very hopeful that he gets some of these really long runs, where he gets to start and plays, 80, 85 minutes, or just, plays the whole way. And I'm very hopeful. I want to get back to a point where I'd be willing to wager on it, but at this point I'm still I have nothing but hope for him.
Yeah. So the last little note I have here is about Arthur Vermereen for Antwerp, who again coolly got to see. I talked about him on the earlier show this week out of the Champions League. I kind of misspoke about his price tag. I want to correction here and shout to those who reached out to me on Instagram about him. That his price tag at 30 to 50 mil, kind of ending this conversation about the Joãos and even Ansu's wages, saying that even if Ansu succeeds, like Barcelona might not be able to afford his wages plus João Félix's transfer fee plus his wages plus João Cancelo, and Vitor Roque, it might not all make sense financially for Barcelona. And then you add the idea of wanting to bring in your future pivot. And I'm trying to tell people, hedging your bet on that pivot, you might have to, because of the way that Barcelona is structured, kick that can down a road and say, next year, so not even this year, but can you get 2 years out of Romeu as the regular starter? Is De Jong then the backup to Romeu, where you don't really worry about another one? And then when you talk about the young players, as I mentioned, I mean, again, I'm not trying to overhype this young group that Barcelona are looking at right now in terms of their pivots. But I will say that I've not seen, it's not like I'm putting all my eggs in some Sergi Samper basket. I'm saying that like the future defensive midfielder at Barcelona after the days of Romeu, maybe in 2 or 3 years, in Marc Bernal, as I mentioned, is the I said it on the earlier show, he is the third highest 2007 born, right? Is that right? 2007 born, yeah, because that's he's the third highest transfer mark valued 2007 birthday. Lamine Yamal is 1, and he is 3. And then again, Pau Preem is 17. Castado is 20. I mean, I've said I'm skeptical about his high level future, but and then Danny Avila is the same age as Bernal, and he's 16. And so it's not, again, Sergi Samper is the future. It's not like who's next. It's that there are 4 high level defensive midfield prospects at Barcelona right now. And we've seen between Lamine Yamal being 16, Gavi 16, Pedri 16, Ansu 16. Like this, if you're good enough, Xavi is taking a chance. So what I'm saying is like Vermeeren is 18. The other one that they're mentioning, Gabriel Marscardo, is either 17 or just turned 18. I think he's 17. Like you're just talking about other players, sure. Like just because another club valued them at 30 mil does not mean like they're as I mean, Vermeeren at least is playing in the first divisions in Belgium and playing the Champions League, and yes, like his ceiling at the moment seems like it's higher than the other players. But I'm saying is like what is stopping one of these? Like again, Bernal as the example, probably the highest rated of the bunch this season, already playing with Barca Athletic at 16. So it's just like, I mean, if he's in a year's time when he's 17 or he turned 17 this year, so in a year's time, in year 1.5 of Vermeer, if Bernal becomes his backup at 17 and is working his way into the first team, like what's stopping him from doing that? Is what I'm saying. It's like I'm almost
Nothing. And
I'm hedging my bets on these young players, but I almost have to rethink from the academy myself. And it's like, yeah, I mean, at 16 or 17, if Xavi says yes, then the answer is yes. Like, it's not like you're not throwing one youngster into the fire. You're throwing a bunch of youngsters into a fire that instead of one player just getting to take this metaphor too far, instead of lighting one player up, light on fire, throwing them into the sun, you're really having a bunch of players kind of like touching the stove and burning their hand a little bit, and but each burning their hand just a little bit.
And you figure out. Look, I think this is particularly in these. I mean, I guess we could almost make the case that I think during the worst transfer periods of the Bartomeu era, and kind of the what I kind of from a purely football perspective, from a purely like who they got and what they paid for it. I mean, I feel like that sort of that cavalcade of 30 to 50 million euro midfielders who passed through and offered very little is one of the biggest things. Or just I don't know. I suppose we do talk about it a lot, but I feel like we still don't talk about enough how much of that probably crippled the club. But because you have to hit on some of these guys, at least now, as you mentioned, if you
didn't hit on Alex Song, you're saying
yeah, oh my god, I'd even forgotten about him. I was I was in the Andre Gomes and Arda Turan gauntlet, but but I think the one interesting thing is. So you mentioned, so if you have 4 guys who are 16 or 17 and showing flashes, no one's a done deal. No one's, ready for prime time yet, but everyone's kind of progressing that way. They've shown the talent and they're relative to their age showing that they might be something special. These are the kind of low cost, low out of pocket cost wagers that I think really successful clubs make is that, if you need if one of these guys is a star, then you're already pretty decently off. And secondly, I mean, if 2 of these guys hits, I mean, if everyone starts developing, you can then literally just start dealing from positions of strength and not always be the buyer. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to always go pay retail to fill a position. And I think another good thing that really encourages me is I realize not all these people, not all these teenagers who are thriving at Barca now made their debuts under Xavi, but there's clearly, a strong contingent of, I mean, teenagers, like really, really young players who have played under Xavi and are thriving under him. I mean, like nothing happened. The developments and progress of Pedri and Gavi did not get stunted when Xavi took over. Balde has burst onto the scene. Lamine Yamal is I don't know, sky's the limit for him. So at this point, also Xavi has shown himself to be a manager that can manage and nurture really really young players and sort of put them in positions to succeed. I mean, Ansu is obviously the big tally in the con column for the last couple of years for Xavi, but everyone else, the young players have like they found some footing, if not just out and out thrived.
Yeah, the two headlines that I'm saying here is that with Vermeeren, this is not a knock on this player. I think that he is going to be sold in the summertime for 30 to 50 mil. And as of what I just laid out about the Felix and Cancelo and
Yeah,
all Peter Roque, like I just don't think Barca are going to be able to be in that bidding war for him. I think he's just going to be he's going to like they're going to have to find the next prospect. And then same thing with Gabriel Moscardo. If Corinthians are already asking for 30 mil for him this past
yeah,
summer, right? And he's now going to play another full year as a starter for Corinthians in Brazil, like they're going to ask for 40 to 50 mil. And again, I think Barca are going to be priced out of the basically even the next
yeah,
guy, 17, 18s you're hearing about now. Barca's are going to be priced out next summer for
yeah,
what they have to spend. So like all I'm saying is like I was at a point where yes, last season, I mean, look at how many Busquets videos did I have? What happened to those guys a year or two later? Like things change a lot in transfer
yep,
world football. So it's just like I'm saying like I'm almost changing my tune a little bit to say, hey, now with this group, it's like a 50-50 shot that next defensive midfielder comes from the academy or pivot comes from the academy instead of coming from the transfers. Where like
and
for the last 3-4 years, I was the opposite. Where I was like, yeah, it just doesn't.
let's go find one. Yeah, like
Yeah, like,
who's on the market?
and then part two of that, like again, the last thing I'll say about this, and we have to finish the show real quick. I'm going to try to get in the next 8 minutes about the women, but anyway, the last thing I want to say about the academy thing is that I would always argue with Frances Tomas, who's been around the club even longer than me. He grew up there, and he knows his brother played for the academy. Like he knows well and better than anybody that like it's one or two a generation. Like you do not like it's not all of them coming from the academy at the same time. That like something special is in the water sometimes, sure, but like you can't expect any of these kids to ever break through until they've actually been in the first team and breaking through. And even Enos Moriba can play a year in the first team and then look where his career goes. Boyan Kirchik played for 2 years and then you look where he goes, right? So even Ansu Fati might be the latest example
Yeah,
where he was in the Barca first team, he was christened as next, and then it doesn't work out.
and then I mean there was Alenia and Ricky
That's what
Puig
I was going to say, though.
and
This
yeah,
is my but. This is my exception to
yeah,
Emile, and this is what I said. I've now been doing this show and covering the academy, really hands-on covering the academy, long enough to tell you that I started this show, and Carlos Alenia was the one name I kept saying. I'm like, I'm looking at that when he was, I believe, the U16s-ish, or maybe he was at the U18 level at that time, but he was always playing a year.
okay, yeah,
But he was the one player playing a year or two up at that time. And I looked at that group and was like, if it's not Carlos Alenia, I don't know who it is, right? Like that is what the group was. Carlos Perez, I believe, was the same age. So like that was the other one. Is like, but Carlos Perez was just fine. He also, I believe, came from CF Dom at 17. Maybe it's somebody who really knows their stuff can correct me or I mean, he came at 17, which again, it takes you a year or two to kind of be like, okay, is that the kid? I mean, Victor Barbera was actually the same thing last or 2 years ago. He came from CF Dom at 17 or late 16, turned 17, and kind of like, okay, Barca liked this player, came out and got him, and then he turns into being sold for money in a year, which is perfect business by Barcelona. But point is, when I started this, it was Alenia. There was no like generation. And I can tell you, like, Lamine Yamal in any other generation, if he was the only one, I'd say, yeah, like that's the guy. If Balde was the only one from a certain generation, I'd say, hey, that's the guy. If Gavi was the only one from a generation, I would say that's the guy. Like I just watched the UEFA Youth League game the other day and looking at G Fernandez, who's 15. Like I watched that kid, even in the sub appearance. I'm like, that kid feels like the kid of that generation. I'm like, no, but he's like a few months younger than Lamine Yamal. And Paul Gabarty is 16. And if I watched him and I said center back prospects, like that's the guy. And it's like this generation, I keep saying, like of even the tape we've seen of Marc Bernal, it's just like I'm looking at all of these kids and saying, in other years, in Alenia's years, I would have said that's the kid and Carlos Alenia. And it's just like this generation of 16 to 19-year-olds, it's just absurd. It is absurd. Like the talent is me telling you after covering the youth academy for 12, 13 years now, that it's like there is a generation right now that I'm not saying an individual name because like no player, again, Ansu, Gabi, even them, like no players a guarantee. All day, even no players a guarantee. But gosh, darn it, like they are players from 16 to 19 right now, age-wise, I mean, who are going to be in the first team for 10 to 12 years. Like there will be one or two or three of them who will be around for a long time. They are just special, special players.
What's interesting is, and I've sort of workshopped this take in my head, and now it's just even listening to say all of that, it kind of crystallized, and I'm willing to fully entrench it and say that these guys, it sort of feels like, in American sports where you have teams that are, I mean, you don't even have to be tanking, but it's just teams who accumulate draft capital. This feels like a team that's accumulated a bunch of draft capital, like, sort of the draft nicks will call it, like, you want more bites at the apple. And so it's like you said, it's not any one name. Like, it could be like it literally, it is not outside the realm of possibility. It could be all of them. It could be none of them. More likely, it will be
Some of them.
some of them. And that's the thing. It's, you've given yourself this many bites at the apple at potentially. If you have, of all the names you said, if you take the top 5, 6 across all the age groups, if you get, I don't know, 2 stars out of that, that's phenomenal.
I mean,
And
in 2019, I did one of my first La Masia updates, right? And
mm,
the left back prospect that I spoke about was 14-year-old Alejandro Balde. That was the kid.
yeah,
I was like, I don't want to talk anything about him because people know that, like, unless you've been in like UEFA Youth League and are actually like playing for the U19,
yeah,
the Juvenil A, until you're at that level, which is like Juvenil A is where you can jump from that level to the first team. Like that is where the jump happens,
yep,
right? Or can happen for like the high level prospects. And then
yep,
obviously Barça Athletics is a different thing and they're younger this year. But if you're playing for the U19s, Barça Athletic, UEFA Youth League, like you could be in the first team next season or get some minutes or
yep.
be on the radar, right? But at that time, he was playing for the Cadet Bays, I want to say, which is like the U15s, not even the U16s, right? Because the
Yeah.
odds at the time was Casado and Xavi Simmons and Jorge Alstui in that group. But like Balde at 14, I was like, that is the best prospect at left back in the academy right now. I'm just saying his name, throwing in the universe. And then I think that was the same year when I was like, I don't want to say even I don't know anything about this kid, but there's a 12-year-old named Lamine Yamal who people say
Yeah.
about, right? Like again, progress isn't linear, but these kids have wound up being as good as they are supposed to be.
Yeah, like they're living up to the billing. I mean, just, or the whatever hype existed to this point.
Okay, so last thing, we're going to change our tune quite a bit. Really, this is just more informational. A dispute between this is all from being reported from actual news sources as well. So the dispute between the Spanish women and the federation, it it is more twists and turns than you could possibly imagine, even after winning the World Cup, using the platform they had. 20 players earlier in the week continued to refuse because, again, this is now 2 weeks ago that the entire Spanish national team basically said, "Hey, we're not going to show up. Like we're done. Like we're petitioning. We're not playing." But there's 2 now UEFA Nations League fixtures against Sweden, which is today, and 21 of the 23 players who originally named for the squad are now traveling to Sweden. Have basically conceded, hey, we will travel. We still are fighting for change. Go and watch Alexi Buteas' the translations at least from her press conference. Like they're still fighting tooth and nail for change. Irene Perneda said the same thing, that we cannot continue to have those who even supported both the manager and the old president from, again, whose names that I'm not even going to say now. Again, like on put them in the past. So like the people who supported them also need to basically face justice. They said 21 of 23 players, Mappy Leon and Patri, in particular, those 2 were like, well, no, our situation is different. Like we refused before, like we didn't go to the World Cup. Like you think we're gonna come to the Nations League? Like our the Spanish national team is over. Like our situation is different. And the federation was like, all right, yeah, I mean, I guess so. Fine. Like they got that, but it puts Monse Tome, the new manager, I mean, in a tough spot because like on the back of on of all the back on the of Rubiales in that situation, it's like yeah, being thrown here in this position, but also like she is now the representation of the federation, right? So like I mean, for her to get this job in the way that she did, like it's obviously like just awkward and weird. Like it's not like the players like chose her as being like a different person. Like the federation still brought her and chose her as the new representative for them. And just the fact that she's a woman is almost like, I mean, again, it's like the federation hiding behind this thing. Like, hey, we put a woman in charge. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
back,
Look,
right?
we gave you a woman. Isn't that cool? Yeah,
She represents the authority that still existed. You know what I mean? And so I
yeah,
think there's this weird thing, and as I tweeted about, like, there's not much to say about it other than like they're upsetting people and continue to upset people and like, but they keep crying. Why do they keep crying? But it's just like that's how change happens. Like I compared it to a
yeah.
hydra. you cut off two heads of the Hydra, but if you don't actually at its root, like get rid of all the heads, then like they're going to keep popping up. Like so, it's like the people complaining about them let me know that these women are on the right side of history. Like,
oh, exactly. I mean, the biggest thing is too. I mean, these women are all collectively trying to affect change from, I mean, a sport and an overarching global institution, as well as a domestic institution in the Spanish Federation that has historically and repeatedly and very recently shown itself to be vocally disinclined from cooperating with them and, showing them, kind of treating them with the respect that they deserve. And so, yeah, I think I just I really applaud and admire Mapi Leon and Patri. I mean, this is to take nothing away from anybody, any of the players who returned to the national team for the World Cup or who have since returned in the aftermath of at least like some of the overhauls that the federation has started to make. But these two, I mean, they're kind of inner circle superstars of the women's game, like at or near the very peak of their powers, and they chose to sit out the World Cup. And the other players that went and won. The one thing that I keep coming back to is the movie Office Space, the guy Michael Bolton. I always go back to the scene there, where they're like, "Why don't you go by Mike?" And he's like, "Why should I change my name? He's the one who sucks." And so, why should Alexia Putellas and Aitana and Irene Paredes and the contingent that returned to the team, why should they? I understand the power of protest and the best thing that, I mean, athletes across the board, the best thing that they can do to garner power is you can withhold your labor. I mean, I guess it's true of just labor, period. But at the same time, like, these women shouldn't give up their lifelong dream of hoisting a World Cup because like the guys in suits suck. So I don't want any of this to be misconstrued as casting a negative light on the players that returned to the national team. But I think for these two to, I mean, they've legitimately drawn a line in the sand for what they think the standard should be, or at least ought to have been. And yeah, you can say like, well, they already won the World Cup. On the one hand, it would just be easier to go back, but now you can say like, well, yeah, I mean, we missed out on the World Cup. We don't want to go for this. But at the very least, it's the whole idea that like you guys aren't doing enough, or this is all a start, but like to one extent or another, we're going to continue to be great club level players for probably the better part of the next decade. And somewhere in the conversation will always be, yeah, these two women, because you guys sucked, decided to essentially, as it stands now, potentially sacrifice their international careers in the name of demanding decency and demanding a voice.
I think both are right in the way that they went about it. I mean, I
Yep.
think the two that stayed out, I mean, I think, yeah, they're saying that, hey, this is like, not saying this problem isn't fixable, but it's just like, yeah, like we cannot choose. We do not want to be a part of this thing that is.
And it's like you just started fixing it. You know what I mean? Like you've given us a couple of like good faith gestures, and you want us to just immediately be like, all right, cool, yeah, clearly they're singing a new tune, and then they, and to just kind of come back and let it all be water under the bridge.
I think those two are right to hold out completely and say like,
yep, exactly,
something that is evil to its core. And then for those that won it, though, I will also say like the thing that they did by going out and almost in not even honor, but like with respect to Mapi Leon and Patri, that they still went out without those two, had the talent to win the World Cup. And as I said before, if they don't win the World Cup, then there's no change. Like Rubiales, without the World Cup, Rubiales is still in his job. Like that.
Yeah, he doesn't have a chance to just completely exactly. just completely disgrace himself.
That's good, right? That platform that they gained by winning the World Cup, their own efforts. They won the World Cup and then were able to use that platform. And I think again, like the only reason you're hearing about the Spanish women's national team being covered the way it is in world football by like the huge whoever, like Al Jazeera and CNN and whoever it may be, like these major international outlets are covering this story because they're the World Cup winners. And if they hadn't won the World Cup, they wouldn't be enacting the change that they are. So like that's the whole thing about like their success and even anything like showing up, like Alexi Putellas and Irene Paredes, as brave as it may be, them showing up and getting in front of the camera for a press conference again is what's continuing to push this forward. Like them being involved and saying, hey, we're here and we're not happy about it. Like that still is like pushing the rock up the hill. Which again, it's the same thing as Mappy Leon and Patry, because as the stars that are there are continuing to be there, there's also that other part that we always bring up, the fact that there's two players that should be there and aren't there because it's still something that's like it's still a work in progress and changing. So anyway, so that I think that's the final word on that. Emile, thank you so much for your time. We have Celta tomorrow. That being we, I mean, I'm not on the team, so FC Barcelona tomorrow. But we, that being me and the podcast channel and this YouTube channel, whatever, and the podcast network, we'll have your 5 headlines tomorrow. So that, for a programming note, I work tomorrow night as well after the game, so I probably won't get it out in time. So look for that about, maybe 18 hours after the game has come out. I know I hear people about the programming notes about like, hey, you want things consistently coming out at the same time, but people want it as soon as possible. So what my promise is, my programming note is the 5 headlines come out as soon as possible. That is when they come out, whether that's 3 hours after the fact, whether that's 18 hours after the fact. So tomorrow for Celta, look for that to come out early on Sunday morning. So that's your programming note. If you're here with me, that's how that's what I'm telling you. So as always, I appreciate everybody helping me get to 15K on the subscribers on YouTube as well. I said that was a big part of the goal, and we got there. Now 20K is the next goal, of course. So thanks so much for listening to the show. Till next time, we'll talk to you soon. And Forza Barça.
Forza Barça.